Today, we will be learning about the evidences of evolution. But before we learn about this, we need to understand what evolution is. So, evolution. So, evolution is the genetic changes in a population over time. So, we got genetic changes in a population over time. And a population is a group of organisms of a species that live and interbreed in a particular geographic area. So now let's move on to the evidences of evolution. These are what show us how evolution occurs, and it also helps us learn a lot of stuff of what happened in the evolution. So evidence of evolution. And we will be learning about 5 of these evidences today. Number 1, the fossil record. Another one is comparative anatomy. Number 3, biochemical evidence. Number 4, observable events. And number 5, biogeography. We'll be going deeper into these topics in just a little bit. So, we're going to start off with the fossil record. So, what does the fossil record show us? So, this is going to help us understand what the fossil record is, but the fossil record. So, first we need to understand what fossils are. So, fossils are imprints or remains of organisms. And these can be found in the strata. It's a sequence in which fossils appear in the layers of sedimentary rocks. So as we can see here, we can see the evolution of a horse from way back to all the way now. The top represents the newest horse, or what's happening right now in the present, or not exactly present, but closest to now. It's a recent rock. And this is from a long time ago. This is an old version of the organism. This is the evolved version, and this is the organism from a long time ago, which was not evolved. So the fossil record can show us this: which organisms are new, or which traits are new, and which traits are old. As you can see, this is the strata right here. And you can see from these different layers of rock, they change through time. So from this horse to this horse, we see the neck getting longer. It's growing some hair right here and here. It's growing a tail. This one, neck gets even longer. This one, the legs get longer and more mobile. This one's the one from today. Standing upright, long legs, long neck. So now that we understand what is the fossil record, let's move on to comparative anatomy. So here is comparative anatomy. So first, whenever we're understanding comparative anatomy, let's look at what we call homologous structures. These are homologous structures. Okay. So sometimes scientists look at these to see which structures are shared by organisms. So, as we can see here, we have multiple shared traits here. Shared things, which shows that these may be related. So homologous structures show divergent evolution. So divergent evolution, let's draw something to understand that. So here's a common ancestor. Now the organisms that evolved from this ancestor, this is an organism, this is an organism. These are produced from divergent evolution because the organisms evolved by diverging from the ancestor. And that is that's how homologous structures are produced. Because maybe all of these organisms had a common ancestor from way back then. Maybe not, but most of the time it is correct. So now let's focus on analogous structures. So these are traits with same function, but a different structure. So these are caused by convergent evolution. So let's draw an example of this. So right here we have a bird, we have an insect. They don't have familiar ancestors, but they still have wings. So that's where they converge. That's where they have wings. Sorry, give me a second. There are the wings. And so this is what we call an analogous structure. Now let's move on to vestigial structures. And we will find this inside this picture or x-ray of a whale. So these are structures that are present but diminished. So that means they're diminished in size or function. So the vestigial function in this whale is right here, this letter C. Because as you know, whales do not use feet, but this shows maybe an ancestor of this whale had feet, and it's carried on this little structure but still doesn't use it. So we have multiple examples of vestigial structures. Let me list some of them here. So you got the human tailbone. We don't use this, but we still have it, and it's diminished in size and function from one of our ancestors. Some snakes have pelvic bones. And this list can go on and on and on and on. This just shows what we know as comparative anatomy, where we can compare structures to understand evolution. Now, there's also another part of this comparative anatomy, which I can show here. So let me take out this so we have a little bit more room. So let's don't focus on this graph. I'm going to show you something else. So embryonic homologies. these can show how different species can appear similar and may have a common ancestor whenever they're going through development in the early stages, when they're an embryo. So if they show similar traits, they may have a similar ancestor. So now let's move on to biochemical evidence. So as you can see here, we have a little graph. So biochemical evidence, let's understand that. Biochemical evidence. So this is comparing amino acids, or comparing amino acid sequence of GANons. So this is how we compare. So as we can see, we're in this graph, we're comparing amino acid sequence of hemoglobin between different species. And this is the difference between humans. So the least number means the least difference. So the gorilla is 1, which means it's the closest related. And as we can see, as we go down the graph, the relations become farther apart. This is a very specific way of seeing how species are related. Now this is a very useful and it's a very nice way, and it's much easier to use in homologous structures. So now let's move on to biogeography. Here we have a map. Let's see. Let's write down biogeography first. So this is the geographic distribution. So distribution in a species. They can show how separated species may have descended from a common ancestor. So this is kind of going back to the Pangea idea right here. Let me pick a different color. Where these different organisms have similar traits, but they're located so far away in the world. But if we piece back these pieces in the puzzle, we can show how they displace, and we figure out how they are very related. Now let's move on to the last evidence of evolution. This is the observable events. Now this is what events us humans can see in a lifetime or more that can be proven and that we have definitely seen. So these show how evolution goes on in an ongoing process. And this is in the human lifetime. So as we can see here, this moth relates back to, which I believe occurred in London, where they had the Industrial Revolution and the coal was spread, and the white-peppered moths had dominant traits because they wouldn't be picked off by predators. But now the moths with black colored wings were not picked off by predators because they could hide in with the coal. So this shows how these observable events can change over time. Thank you, and please subscribe.